But yes, there we go. We can start the recording. My name is Cheryl Tenasco White Duck. I work with the First Nations Health and Social Services, Quebec Labrador. In the housekeeping, this meeting is recorded and will be put on YouTube. The recording can be dispatched now as it is. Participants are encouraged to mute your microphones and turn off your cameras. If all those in attendance can write their emails in the chat, at any time you can put questions in the chat as well. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, and you can turn on your cameras then so that we can all see each other and have a big party. So I'd like to welcome the participants. Thank you for coming to Growing Together. We welcome you to these workshops 0 to 4. The workshops are brought to you in partnership by First Nations Education Council and the First Nations Health and Social Service Commission, Quebec Labrador. We have, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, approximately 3 workshops left. Yeah. And I just wanted to say as a reminder for those of you who are sending in receipts for the training that's being executed, please remember to send them to Melanie Otsis or myself. And with that, I've introduced myself. Everybody knows I'm an advisor for FNQL HSSC. And today we have our trainers, Elena Clugston and Eva DeGostini, and I will let you introduce yourselves.
Thank you. But I'm just wondering if Melanie, if you want to just say a few words of welcome to people from the commission as well.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, welcome to everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to see that there's still a lot of people. We're at session 5, so it's really nice, and we hear really great feedback, and there's things happening in communities. So that's what we want, and we're really happy that you're all here, and hopefully you can spread the word so everybody can, come to the next session or go see on YouTube all the videos and the last workshop that we've done. Welcome.
Thanks, Melanie. So I'm Eva DeGostini, and I have with me, of course, Lena Clugston. We are both faculty with the Neufeld Institute, and we're sharing with you various perspectives that have been prepared by Dr. Neufeld that help us to understand the development of children. I've worked with children all across Canada. I am a psychologist, and my area is mainly working with schools, but the paradigm that Dr. Neufeld has prepared for us is one that works right from 0 to till 99 or however. So together with Lena, we're going to be sharing with you just some ideas and things that will help you to understand your children a bit better. Specifically today, our focus is going to be on frustration. Lena, maybe you can just introduce yourself with a few words.
Yes, thank you, Eva. And thank you, Cheryl, for the beautiful introduction to our work together and the prayer. It's such an honor to be together with all of you. This is not easy material in some ways because it requires a shift in how we look at things. And today we're going to be presenting material which can be very sensitive. And we're going to be asking of you to be open to shifting your vision. For those of you who've been with us since the first session, you may recall that very early on, we talked about noticing. What do you notice? And this is particularly salient in today's topic. So thank you all. My work is with young children, has been for many years. Sorry, I didn't mention that. And I'm also newly a grandmother, mother of 3, and grandmother to 1.
Yes. So Lena is definitely the person who knows the most about day-to-day work with the very little ones, the ones that you are taking care of and that you are interacting with. And so between the two of us, hopefully we can share our insight, our experience, and then we will, Cheryl, of course, will help us to make the links with First Nations teachings and ways of doing things that that sort of see that it all ties together. We hope that what we say today, even it might be a little bit challenging, there'll be things that you're wondering about. Hopefully you'll feel moved to put your questions into the chat box, but also just understand that we anything that we say, we do not mean to be critical of what you're already doing, because we all do the best we can. But sometimes if we understand and see things differently, it will move us to actually do things differently as well. And very often it resonates with what's deep in our heart. You know, we've been told to do certain things, we do them, but it doesn't sit right with us. So hopefully today you might get some understanding of why maybe some things haven't felt quite right to you. So Lena, I will let you get going with our slides.
Thank you, Eva. Okay, can we see this?
I am seeing your whole presenter view.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so just stop sharing screen, I think, and go behind and set it up behind first. Start up your PowerPoint first and then come back.
The PowerPoint is set up.
Okay, and so
But,
now you go to advanced.
I'm sorry, I need to
Yeah.
go to screen share. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Normally I don't forget that.
All little technicalities, yes.
There we
There
are.
we go. Beautiful.
Okay. And you can see that now?
Yep, just
All
your slides, so that's good.
All right. So this is our introductory page, addressing aggression and challenging behavior. Very important topics for the management of a classroom. And this is our schedule for today. We will have a 15-minute break at around the 2:30 time. And we'll be looking at frustration before the break and challenging behavior after the break. There will be, as Cheryl mentioned, questions and reflections at the end. And I've already said this, but again, it can't be said enough that learning to manage and reduce frustration is a huge boon to any classroom, wherever you are working with young children. It's a difficult time of life for them in terms of frustration. This is a picture of my classroom at Bowdoin College Children's Center, where I was for many years working with the Neufeld paradigm in bringing the theory into practice, which is really challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. And that's what we're hoping to share with you today, so that you, through the stories and the theory that we're presenting, will have some idea if you want to try to apply some of these teachings to your classroom. I'd just like to take a moment at the beginning to connect us with the cycles of nature, these reliable, universal cycles that shape us all from the inside out. And today we are in spring, although where I live in Maine, one wouldn't necessarily know that. There are some things blooming, but there's also a threat of snow. I just want to share a little poem about spring that relates a bit to our session last time, where we talked about the sun and the importance of warmth in bringing children into relationship with us. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. And then there's a proverb that I found about spring from the Kiowa, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, Indigenous people. Walk lightly in the spring, Mother Earth is pregnant. And certainly we see signs of rebirth and growth everywhere at this time of year, and it's so inspiring to us. And now coming to the theory, Eva, do you want to take a moment to speak to this?
Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking about a particular emotion, but just as a review, to remember that we all have a deep part of our brain that is involved with our emotions, that really makes us who we are as human beings, and they're neither good nor bad. And we need to we'll focus a little bit on that today, even though we'll see that sometimes there are manifestations, but it's neither. Emotions are absolutely essential. They move us, they affect us. And we're using today a water theme because emotions are like water. They need to go somewhere. They are moving somewhere. There's a purpose for it. There's a flow. There's an energy. And it's really important that we understand that this, we have to respect and work with this energy.
And then, of course, we have moments of emotions being stirred up. Go ahead, Eva.
Yes, yes. Well, sometimes there's a lot of energy there. But again, we need to understand that those emotions are there for a reason. They're there to ensure our survival. They're there to ensure our connection with the people who we count on for our survival. They are so essential. And of course, they cause us to react. There's, something is going to happen. And they have to go somewhere. And the message I think that we want to be giving today is, how do we help one particular of these emotions? That's a very powerful one. How do we help it to keep moving in a way that is healthy for the child, but also maybe a way of managing it as well, so it doesn't hurt other people? But emotions are like this water. They have to go somewhere.
And I want to add to that wonderful explanation the observation that you all know, because you're doing the work with young children, they're pretty much living in a world of emotion. And they don't know really what to do with it. They haven't got the brain development yet. And we'll be talking about that a lot. This is in time of immaturity. And so the emotional flow is really what they're aware of. And they don't have a lot of control over it, just like this water going over the rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's all sorts of different reasons why they're stirred up. And when they when we look at frustration is what is stirred up in us when something's not working, when we encounter an obstacle, when it doesn't feel right, when something isn't right. And of course, many of you'll know exactly why Elena picked this lovely picture, is because you know that sometimes it goes over the top and it causes problems.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And we're going to be taking you through redefining frustration in a way. So we're setting the groundwork here for a little bit, or the water work, for a little bit of deep dive into what frustration and emotions are all about in a young child.
Yeah, so just again, a little reworking again of remembering that something happens on the outside, this part of our brain, that's the emotional part of our brain. And Cheryl reminded me, there are some people, I believe his name is Dan Siegel, and I don't know if he was the one that started that. I learned this from a lovely woman called Reginalina Melrose, where basically it reminded us that our brain is kind of like our hand. We have our brain stem here, which basically, it causes heart rate and breathing and temperature and so on, those things to happen. But our little amygdala here, that is one of the main parts of our limbic system, that is like our little smoke detector. It detects something that's going on in the environment that we need to pay attention to. And so it communicates, it changes the heart rate, the skin tone, the eyes. And all of you know that. You know your babies well enough, even the totally nonverbal ones. You know when something's changed in them, something's not feeling right. And basically, once that gets started, it's got to move through like the water. And in our children, it usually comes out in behavior. Now, there's another part of this where this part here is the part of our brain that is supposed to be managing our emotions. But if you remember from our earlier sessions, prior to the age of 5 years old, this part of the brain that is supposed to help us deal with this very rich and lively emotional world is not really well developed yet. And that's why this part of our brain is just pushing out so many emotions, so many activities, causing behaviors to happen, because we're not quite there yet in terms of our development.
That's right. And this is the point in working with young children that cannot be stressed enough, and something that we've all learned is that they live in the world of emotions. This is their main way of sensing things, their cognitive development and their way of processing their experiences. They don't have much context for life. They're just learning.
Yes, and from a developmental perspective, we've got to give it the time. That's why, again, we always go back to the seasons, right? Because we remember we've got to give it the time. So frustration, oh my goodness. We know, we see what doesn't work out very well, but actually frustration and is a very, very wonderful, positive emotion. It's extremely powerful and strong, and that's why these eruptions can happen. But without frustration, our world would be a very sad place, because it is the emotion that moves us to want to change things. All of our leaders, the people that are trying to make change in the world, that they are moved by this emotion of frustration. We need to find a solution for something that is not working. And so it basically, it's like a switch that comes on that says, let's figure out what we can do differently. It's also the emotion that allows our children to tell us that something's not working for them. My hands are cold, I'm hungry, I want to play with that toy, I don't want to leave. And if the children didn't tell us these things, if they weren't moved by that emotion to let us know that something isn't working with them, how could we help them? So we need to know that. And the beauty of it is that sometimes, and all of you know this as adults as well, sometimes something's not working for us and we tell our spouse, I need a bit more time. You're speaking a bit loudly right now. All of these things are just ways to make our world work. And when we do that, often people say, oh, I didn't know. Of course, I'd be happy to do that. Remember, my daughter came into the kitchen one day. She must have had a headache. And I had every single light on in the kitchen. And she said, Mom, it's really too bright here. That was her frustration speaking. Oh, okay. So now I know there's too much light for you. And so we need to honor this wonderful, wonderful emotion, because it is the emotion that moves us as humans to cause change in our world. But as Dr. Neufeld tells us, it is a very, very powerful emotion. But we need to honor it and respect it, because it's essential for us.
And at this age, as I seem to keep saying over and over again, it is in its raw and most primitive form with very little filtration. And as a mother, I have had the occasion several times of having my children tell me something that they were feeling or experiencing, even if they weren't quite feeling it yet, but didn't tell me about, didn't share. And it's but then did in adulthood. My point being that it's such a delicate time for making the invitation for emotion, and especially the emotion of frustration of things that aren't working well, to be embraced as the caregivers.
Yeah.
So frustration, as we have also said several times, must find a way around, a way to come out. And Dr. Neufeld has articulated for us in his paradigm the ways that those frustration emotions can come out. The first is change. My hands are cold, we saw in the last slide. Okay, we can fix that. We can change that. We warm up the hands, we put on new mittens, whatever is needed. The next way is through tears, which is really the byproduct of embracing disappointment. So if something can't be changed, we're sad. And this is the second outlet for frustration. Sometimes, though, neither of those two avenues are open, and the frustration comes out as attack. And I think that is the primary concern of many adults who are working with young children. We're calling this noticing the faces of frustration. When something is not working, there are three outlets for frustration. A change is made, or a futility or disappointment is embraced and faced, and we often get tears. And if not, the energy turns to attack. So what is our job? It is to be invitational, to give space, to help this flow of frustration find its way out, to start seeing this process in the children. So we find that when change is possible, frustration is drained away. The problem is fixed. There are things we can do.
And so many times in the day, your children are frustrated. Something's not working for them, and you are there. You notice the signs. Again, they don't have to tell you in words. Many of you see it in their that you notice they're uncomfortable. Many of you, of course, if their children are the very little ones, you say, "Oh, yep, they need a diaper change right now," and away you go, and it's done, and it's not a problem, and the frustration just dissipates. It just kind of goes away because the brain says, "Oh, I don't have to. The problem is solved. I don't have to do anything anymore."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then when change is not possible, frustration turns to sadness. Disappointment is embraced and is drained away through tears. And it often with young children, it is indeed tears. But sometimes they just feel sad. And if we can embrace that sadness with them, and not necessarily physically embrace, but with our understanding and empathy, articulate that they may be feeling sad, and that's okay, that we can accept that and we can be comfortable with that.
Yeah. And just another little tidbit about the tears is so once the brain is activated, like wanting to do something through frustration, there are chemicals that are in our body, like cortisol and adrenaline. And what they found is when they've studied the tears of this kind of sadness, so when we can't fix something, they've actually noticed that those tears drain away the adrenaline and the cortisol that we no longer need anymore. And so tears have so many different uses. They're necessary, and we'll see in a moment, for our psychological well-being, but also just for physically as well. So, remember, it's not easy being a little one. There's lots of stuff going on in there. And so when those tears can flow, that can regulate the body as well. It makes a big difference to the physical well-being of the child, as well as the psychological and emotional well-being. Yeah.
I just want to add, Eva, at this moment, that although this may be intuitive knowledge, for me, it was something that this articulation of how frustration worked opened up lots of possibilities for me in terms of how to change things and what to do, and how to make a classroom work, and how to keep the children in a state where they could play freely. And but it was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So noticing the faces of frustration again. Change is not possible. Frustration has no way out through tears. Sometimes they're not ready to cry. Sometimes the setting isn't right for feeling sadness. As an adult, even, we know how hard it can be sometimes to find a place to cry. And so This can sometimes not happen. It builds up, it spills over as attacking energy. And the important thing to realize about this is that now we're going to start looking at attacking energy as blocked, as frustration that's seeking a way out, but the pressure is relieved only temporarily. The real change happens, and one of the ways that it changes comes through brain maturation, which we're not going to touch on. But for these young children, it's often through the sadness and through the tears.
Yeah.
So I love this. When we see attack, think frustration.
Yep.
Just that new way of thinking about it.
Yeah. And it makes a huge difference. The children can even feel it, because when we say, oh my goodness, and frustration is something not working. I worked with a whole school that was full of children with lots of frustration, and the staff themselves said, as soon as, if a child was kind of needing to get that frustration out, wasn't able to find their tears yet. And when in their head, when they said, rather than, oh, he's so angry, and they said, oh, something's not working for him, the child could actually feel the difference in the way they were seeing the problem, experiencing the problem. And one little boy, I remember, took the staff's hand and said, oh, why are you so nice to me? And the teacher hadn't even said anything, but just the attitude, the way she saw it, it was no longer a judgment on the child, but a sense of, oh, I wonder what's not working. I wonder what's not working. And she hadn't even gotten around to helping him find a way out yet, but that already made him feel better, that she could see that something was going on inside of him.
Yes. Yes, and one of the beautiful phrases that we have from Dr. Neufeld is giving the invitation to exist. So if we're going to practice that, how do we give an invitation to exist in the face of attack? That's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So childhood is a time of multiple frustrations because there isn't a lot of to work with in terms of the brain's development yet. They only have a few avenues open to them for attachments and for expression. And many things don't work. They don't know how anything works. We are their guides to how things work, and much is out of their control. And so what they feel, because this flow of emotion is really what's running the show for a young child, they feel a lot. And what they feel is often a big deal, a big enough deal that they might bite somebody or they might push. And they experience a lot of frustration, and things can quickly move to aggression. We've all seen this. We know how fast it can happen. We do, as Eva said on the last slide, we do take the attitude of normalizing that frustration is just part of the age and stage. So do you want to say some more?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's exactly it. We have our little guy here. I mean, he's just so cute. You can't be upset with him. But, I would imagine that this could cause some concerns, because when that attacking energy is there, well, they find ways of letting us know this is not working for me and you're not fixing it fast enough. So they hit, they push, they bite, they have tantrums. They call you the worst name in the world. I remember, I just got to tell this story. So cute. My friend's son got so upset with her. He was little, maybe 1.5 or 2, just barely talking. He got so mad. You pantyhose, he called his mother. But he had to, he was calling her a name, and of course they grab, and they're very selfish, and they cry, and they name call, and sometimes they even will hurt themselves. We know that some children who will bang their heads or pull at their hair or call themselves names, and again, it's partly because so much is out of their control. And because that brain yet is not yet able them to help them know how to deal with it. So Dr. Neufeld calls this the early years are a very violent time of life. The only good thing is that they're usually little. So it's not quite as hurtful, but it's a difficult time, and they can get into so much trouble as a result of it, when it's really something that we have to help them work with, because they don't have the capacity yet to do it. So these aren't pleasant things to experience, but they are completely normal for that age, especially when a lot of things are not working in their life.
Yes. Yes. And we've all experienced this as well. It can change from bright, sunny to very dark and cloudy, a gentle flow to a raging torrent. But again, something has happened that has built up and has to come out. And just as we don't expect a young infant to be able to walk, in a way, when we're talking about the emotional life of a child, it's really hard to, at first, to wrap our heads around the fact that they really can't control much of their response to whatever is frustrating them, whatever isn't working. And so again, we're treating them as though they are infants emotionally, which is exactly what they are.
Which is hard when, especially when you get around to 3 going on 4 years old, and some of these children are very bright, like they can talk a lot, but when we know what's going on inside of their brains, just the fact that they're able to tell us what what they're supposed to do doesn't mean that the part of the brain that can manage that is developed yet. And it's really, really hard. We also have a tendency, I mean, I can imagine that someone might look at a child like this and say, well, what's wrong with you? A minute ago you were happy. Like, why is it the end of the world right now? But that's exactly how it feels to a child. It is 1 minute one way and next minute the next. And the other thing, which we mentioned last time, but we'll say again, they need to live for 4 years with these pure emotions. And when they do that, when each emotion can be lived in its fullness, then they can start to put them together. And so we just need to say, okay, this is what's going to happen. And this is perfectly normal. This is perfectly natural. This is what is meant. Nature has a reason for why it is like this. And so I think it's important to keep reminding ourselves that we can't, that we have to let nature take its time.
Yes. Yeah. And, they have very few experiences, and so they're very dependent. They're very dependent on us for everything. And we know how vulnerable that can feel, to be in a dependent place. So it often leads to, I don't know what's going on and I need somebody to help me. And then we can see these attacks in that way. And then we can move in as helpers. So what is our role in managing frustration? What can we do? Well, here's the change face. So remember, we're looking at 3 faces: change, tears, and attack. Change what we can to reduce frustration. So we know we can help them stay warm. We can have their clothes fit. Sometimes children are so sensitive, even their socks don't feel right. If we can be sympathetic to uncomfortable clothing, make sure that they are able to eat, which requires that they have a restful relationship with us. And we can change, I put down seating here. We can change the configuration of the lunch table or the snack table if there's a particular problem with a child not being able to tolerate somebody or needing to be near an adult or whatever. So there's lots of things we're easily able to change. And in point of fact, most of the time we are doing that. We're changing things. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, part of what people just spontaneously and naturally do. you just respond as best you can, as quickly as you can, to make the child feel more comfortable. And
Right.
that's
Yeah. And we know those things are somewhat obvious. Now the tears and facing disappointment piece of it. This is a little bit harder, but we can help a child face things that cannot be changed. We call that the wall of futility. You'll see that coming up quite a bit in subsequent slides. But here are some examples of things that cannot be changed, where we can be sympathetic to the child's feelings, being dropped off at the beginning of the day, having an interruption in their activities, in their play, in which they're deeply engrossed, in which we want them to be deeply engrossed, but then but we're on a schedule, and things have to happen in a certain order. So those interruptions can be very, very upsetting for a child. And we can't change someone's mind. There can be losses, divorce, move, other things that just simply are not within the child's control or anyone's control, particularly to change. And facing this can often be very difficult for a child. And often it's not faced directly because they don't really know what's upsetting them. So frustration can build up and then may erupt in an unrelated situation. So some little thing that happens in the center suddenly becomes a big thing. Eva, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That it might seem something small. It might seem like, you're trying to help them. You're trying to fix their sock, and you think that's what needs to be changed. And here you are changing, and then all of a sudden they fall apart. Well, it wasn't the sock that was the issue. There was something else. And many of you know, and we'll come back to this a little bit later when we see the attack, how the attack comes and how to work with it. But we need to remember that frustration, if it can't come out by change, or if it can't come out through tears, it will build up. But it's not something you can see. It in the olden days, and I say olden days because now we have fewer and fewer carpets in our homes, but it's like static electricity. And I think all of you can remember that, especially in the winter time. You've been walking around and you go to turn on or off a light switch and you get this little shock and you don't even know where that shock came from. Well, it's because as you've been walking on the carpets, the static electricity has been building up in your body. You didn't even know it was there. You had no idea it was there until you touched that light switch. Well, that is the situation for many of our children, is that there are big frustrations going on in their lives, and they're building up and building up. And then, of course, one little thing will put them over the top. And so it's just important to understand that, the dynamic of that.
Yeah. So, yes, here we have the log jam. We're calling it the wall of futility, facing things that cannot be changed, encountering things that can't be changed. And when they can't be changed, a child will either, or an adult, anyone, will either embrace this disappointment, perhaps find their tears, but certainly find a feeling of sadness, or they will rail against this futility and move into attack or tantrums, something like that. And again, it's important to remember, it can sometimes be self-attack, which could even look like withdrawal.
Yeah. But this wall of futility is something that is really, it's a wall that isn't going to move, no matter how much you try and change it. It can't change. And we all know that there are things we can't make somebody love us. We can't, we can't make Monday a holiday. There are things that we cannot change, and that's what we're talking about, is something that you cannot be changed. And so we have to come to terms with that in some way.
And in point of fact, for a child, most of their life, they cannot change.
Yeah.
So they are constantly they're encountering walls, barriers, limits, boundaries, things like that. Yeah. So what do we do? How we help the child embrace the disappointment? this is well, we're going to see a beautiful example of this later, but just to maybe foreshadow it a little bit, it means that we are that nothing's going to change, but we also are sympathetic to how they are feeling, that makes them sad. Yeah. So the first step is to clearly and softly and gently and warmly, remember our sun, no north winds here. We want to give the message that this isn't going to happen. And we understand that makes you sad.
And one of the things that we have maybe a bit of a tendency to do, because sometimes we are hesitant to actually be very clear on the fact that, mommy has to go now. Grandmother has to leave now. And sometimes we're so tempted to want to explain and say, grandmother has to leave now, but she's going to come back. And, and we try and take away that sense of that there's a limit. But actually, Dr. Neufeld tells us that for children to really be able to process that there are things in life you cannot change, we as the adults have to be quite comfortable with being able to put that limit there without too many explanations. We want to stay in the emotional brain and not, and some of you know that by the time your children get to be around 4 years old, some of them are like, they can argue back with you. No, but mommy's this and mommy that. We want, in life, they need to sense that there is this wall, that it is there. And many times actually, when it's really clear, children do, like when that wall of futility comes, some children, they realize, okay, this isn't something I can change. I remember my daughter saying, "Mommy, you're not going to change your mind." "No, honey, I'm not." Whew. Then somehow she just needed to know. She needed to know, can I keep arguing with mommy to make her change her mind? And she actually was a relief to her to know this was where it stopped. So it can kind of seem a bit mean sometimes to not to want to give a 2 or 3 minute explanation, but actually it was quite relieving. So many of our children, and again, how we do it, and we'll talk a little bit later about how we make those changes, but sometimes some children have never really heard a limit. Somehow they've always figured they could keep pushing it. So we need to be comfortable, because of course, when we do give that limit, our children are going to be sad. They're going to be upset with us. Like my daughter, and it was interesting because it was a perfect scenario. And she said, "You're not going to change your mind, mommy." "No, I'm not changing my mind." And then she looked sad. Now, if I hadn't understood the paradigm, I would have felt guilty about making her feel sad. But I realized, no, now she's learning how to process the futility, to find the sad, and then to move on, to find another way around, to find another way through. So it's one of those odd things where actually being firm but kind is very helpful to a child. I don't know, Lynn, if you want to elaborate a bit more on that.
I just wanted to, that's such an important message, Eva. And there's two things. One of the ways I noticed people, adults, softening the limit, or the imposing a limit, they would say, "Okay." I can't tell you how many times somebody would drop a child off and say, "I'm going now, okay?" Now, of course, I know what the parent meant, which was, "Do you understand?" They weren't really asking, okay, but to a child, this can be confusing. So we made it a habit in the classroom not to add okay when we were imposing a limit, that we felt that this was not useful to the child because it probably, for two reasons, wasn't okay, and we weren't really asking that question. To say, "Do you understand?" would have been, better yet, even to say, "I will be back," would be a gentler way to give that. And then the other important thing that Eva touched upon is the relief that a child feels, because they know they're 3 years old or 4 years old. They know they shouldn't be in charge of things. And it doesn't feel safe to a child to not occasionally have the adults in their lives embracing the limits, showing them the way, and being firm. We used to call, in one of the classes that I taught, we called the wall of futility, the soft wall of futility.
Yeah. But it still needs to be there. And many times parents, well, for a whole number of different reasons. One, because we're told, there are some people that say children should never be sad. There's something wrong if your child is sad. And we're going to tell you in a moment what sadness does. It's a beautiful, beautiful emotion that allows us to actually find a way through. And so we try everything we can to distract and to take it away. That doesn't mean to say sometimes you can do that. And you feel badly. There's something wrong with me as a parent if my child is crying. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic when they were interviewing parents, and they would worry about the child's, emotional health, and the parent would say, my child is crying a lot. Well, there were a lot of no's at the beginning of the pandemic. You couldn't go to school. You can see your friends. My child is crying all the time. And I wanted to kind of shake the TV set and call the interviewer up and say, no, that child is very healthy. Very healthy.
Yeah.
Because this was something you can't change, and crying is a very healthy response. I am much more worried about when a child is presented to us and a parent has said, this is a very young child, my child hasn't cried in years. I know that child's going to have problems. Yes. Crying and tears are a sign of emotional health, especially in children, but even in us. And again, we all know because of course the ultimate frustration is somebody dying. And you all know that if someone's had someone very close to them, a loss, they haven't started grieving yet, we all know that that's worrisome. We know sometimes it takes time before the grief can come out, but we're waiting for the tears to fall.
Yes. And we're spending a lot of time on this because it's so, in some ways, radical. Maybe not to everyone, but certainly that we're allowing sadness because it's part of a process. You will notice in this picture that it's a blooming garden. The water is draining freely. It's not jammed up. Things are better after there's been a cry and after a wall has been accepted in a way. It almost is a relief, as I think Eva said before. Yeah. So we're going to continue on this. We're calling it embracing disappointment. And that, how does the child recognize, like Eva's daughter did, she asked, you're not going to change your mind, I think, for the words.
Yes.
But there are many ways that the child recognizes this wall, because it's inside us. We are the ones giving this message softly, calmly, warmly, but the children know our inner states sometimes better than I do, but they recognize the wall. They recognize in your stance, in your voice, in your inner being, when they have hit this boundary, this limit. So they recognize the wall, and it's passive with warmth and firmness, and how we phrase it. Yeah, we can even say, I know this makes you sad, and just leave it at that, acknowledging their feeling, but that in the end, it is not negotiable. This cookie isn't going to happen before dinner. I am leaving you at the center, or sometimes I am picking you up. It can go both ways with children, which we've talked about at other times. And what happens then, after the tears or the experience of sadness, a child has learned that they can survive a limit, they feel that release, relief. And there is a strength that is starting to be built internally of adaptation, of being able to look at futilities, grieve them, and move on.
Yes,
So
and I love this picture. Elena chose this picture, and I just thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what adaptation is. It's a wall, and then when we cry and grieve and let go of the answer we thought to life, we mentioned sometimes the child thinks the answer to life is a cookie before supper, and when we no cookie, we don't explain, no cookie, and they have their sadness and they can cry about it. All of a sudden, and again, a cookie is a small thing, but all of a sudden, our brain is able to see another way through this door opening into a beautiful garden. I guess the other example that that probably most of us have experienced in our lives is being rejected by, especially our first love. And many, or if you're a parent and your child has had that experience. And I remember when it happened with my daughter, and she said, she's at the wall of futility. Life is, she's feeling her whole, like it's over, and I'm never going to find anyone ever again. And it's so tempting in that moment to tell her, of course, there's plenty of other fish in the sea, and there's so many other people, and you didn't deserve him, and all these things that you'd want to say to take her sadness away. But because I understood the paradigm, I kept my mouth shut, and I let her have her sadness, and I let her have her tears, because I knew that when she went through grieving, losing the answer, the love of her life, that she would then all of a sudden open up to other possibilities. And that's what it's kind of a going down into sadness and then opening up. And of course, in these early years, the child has to experience that many, many times, and the brain becomes stronger. We call that resilience, resourcefulness. It's not something from your head, it's from your emotions. And you start to see more and more openings in the wall and other ways through and other answers that you never knew you had.
yes, adaptation is this emotional process whereby we are changed by that which we cannot change. This is the paradox.
Yeah. And it only comes through deep sadness and tears. And this is true for our little tiny children. I always figure that in our, we should have grandmothers and aunties and people in our center whose only job it is to hold the children who are crying. And if we did that, and some of our children have lots to cry about, there's many things that have not worked in their lives, lots and lots of hurts and lots of sadness that they need to have. And it can be, and the other thing too is the tears of adaptation. There's different levels of tears. The tears of adaptation are deep inside when they happen. And I know all of you have held a child like that who's just sobbing with their whole body, right? And of course, with little ones, we know that because that's off. Everything is in with their whole body. When children get a bit older, it can be very distressing to see that, but it is the process by which they can bounce back from a life that isn't working very well. But you have to be willing to sit with that sadness. Yeah.
Yes. And we talk about children needing to learn at this age. And of course, they're learning all the time. And what we're describing here is an emotional learning that then goes into the brain and is in reserve and can be pulled out. They don't have much experience in life. And so these are the experiences that really count, because all of life, we're going through a process of sadness and moving on, and loss and moving on. It's just part of what it is to be a human being.
Yeah.
So the important feeling sad is vulnerable, so the child needs to feel safe and accepted, that invitation to exist. And then the flip side, children are masters of reading our emotions. Because that's the only language that works for a young child. So they pick it up from us as well. So this is a place where the adult must also be comfortable with sadness. We can't fake it. We have to just empty our hearts and reach out with our arms and draw them in.
Yeah. And for some of us, it was, I know for myself, it was just a question of becoming aware of it, of changing some of the kind of the things that were going on in my mind that had been fed by other people. Because I think that I'm not sure in my own family how much sadness was accepted, but we had a pretty, we talked the last time about a cookie cutter. I had a relatively okay cookie cutter. There were things that were, but sadness was all right. But I needed permission. I needed the permission of this paradigm to make me embrace it. And as I said, I did with my daughter and my son as well. But with my daughter, so embracing it. But unfortunately, for some of you, it might well be that someone has told you very clearly all your life, don't cry, that's not acceptable. So it might be harder for you to do that. We all struggle with things in our lives. Some of you are going to be better at handling the child who is melting down. Some of you are going to be better with, the child who's anxious. We all have, and that's why if you can, working in your center, working as a team to be able to meet these emotional needs of children. But I'm hoping that for most of you, just being given the permission that sadness and tears are okay, that you don't have to take them away. I mean, this picture here is so lovely because it's so clear this little child is being embraced in their sadness, by the worker. And the other thing too, which I like about this picture, is the other little one is looking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important. It's one of the powerful things about being in a center is that we can, by how we interact with one child, let the other children know that it's okay to be sad. Nobody has to tell that little child in words. He can see it in the reaction of the adults there. So it's so important, and he'll know when it's his turn, that when he cries, someone will be there to pick him up as well.
Hopi proverb. We were discussing this yesterday in age, and I think that maybe the meaning is with age, we talk. In childhood, we have tears. That tears are a natural part of childhood. And it's that normalizing of it, as Eva was referring to that child who was watching. A little story occurs to me. The children that I took care of, I had in my care for 3 years, infant room through the older toddler room. And there was a child, and we were working with this idea that it was just in our classroom that we were accepting of sadness when we were able. It's always impossible to say 100% of the time, but this was basically how we were functioning. He was in preschool the next year in the preschool class, and I was told a story. His dad came to pick him up, and someone else was crying on their mat. And this little child, Harry, said, "He's crying. He misses his mommy. It's okay to cry. I'm not crying. I don't miss my mommy." End of story. But we had so normalized that tears and sadness were a natural part of their lives that he just said that to his father completely matter-of-factly and went about his business. Okay, that person's crying. They miss their mommy, but I'm not crying now.
Yeah. Lovely.
Want to talk about this one?
Yeah. So basically, again, tears, if we think of tears as leading to this wonderful capacity of the brain to see the world in a different way. It's kind of, and so adaptation, it builds our capacity to find different solutions. And so it's really important that we see that. Now, how do we know the child is getting into this adaptation mode? Because again, I mentioned before, there were different kinds of tears, but the sense of sadness or tears when they are in the adaptive mode, it's literally like a shift going down. With my daughter at that moment in time when she said, "Mommy, you mean I can't change your mind?" And I said, "No, honey, there's no mind change." She didn't actually burst into tears. She just went, right away. So there was a shift. So other children would burst into tears. There's nothing, but again, it's how does it go down? Does it go down? Does that shift happen? There's a quiver, sometimes a sigh, a deep breath, and obviously the tears. And Elena, you brought this to my attention. In that moment, they actually come back into relationship with us, because now they're no longer trying to change our mind. Now they're, and now we can hold them. And now we can support them. With a slightly older child, we might be able to talk a little bit to them, but actually talking is really, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I think the less we say, the better. And so it's our job to be the midwives to this adaptive process, to help our children to find their tears, to come alongside them and to encourage the sadness to happen. That's not working for you. Oh, that's not working for you. And then let the sadness happen. And then when the tears come, just sit with it. A midwife doesn't pull the baby out. A midwife lets the baby come in its natural time. We need to let the tears come, the tears come, the tears come. And when they finally all come out, we just hold it. And then the growth can happen. It's an amazing process. And again, I don't have that much experience with little babies, but in my own family, especially with my daughter, this has been the biggest gift I've been given in terms of building my relationship with her. And I became her crying place. And one day she said, "Mom, I didn't even know I needed to cry. And I started telephoning you, just pushing, and I started to cry." And that's the biggest gift, when our children, when people we love come to us and see us and burst into tears, we know we are their safe place and the safe place for adaptation.
Yes. Beautiful. And when you say come back into relationship with us, I think it's important to remember that right relationship with an adult and child is, we've talked about, is with the adult being the provider and giving something to the child who's the seeker. And you can feel that when they're in the, well, I want to change thing, and then it comes back to this, where they're softened, they are united with us, we're in right relationship, they've accepted our leadership.
Yeah.
Which is a huge relief to a child. They've accepted our leadership with that no. Yeah. I didn't say that word. With that futility.
With that limit, with that futility, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to share with you a little clip from the movie called Inside Out. Hopefully many of you know it. There are a few characters in it. You're going to see, if you see on the left there where it has actually Inside Out, you have this little joyous person, that's called Joy. And then we have the little person in the glasses who's Sadness, and the elephant who's called Bing Bong. And then there's also a little girl who is the girl of Bing Bong, the elephant, and sadness and joy are emotions that are working inside. And so we're going to just show you this little clip about how the Disney people have actually cottoned on to how this works. So Lena, you're going to stop sharing your screen.
Thank you.
And I'm going to try and go and find, okay, let me see what I'm doing here. I am going to actually, let me see if I can share my screen and see if I can find it. No,
Eva, I just want to say it's Melanie that I love that movie.
oh, good, good.
And I think
All right.
everybody should watch it. Like it's so, I don't know, he explains really well emotions. And anyway, just wanted to step in.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. So let me just see here. All right. So I found it on my screen. Now I need to share screen, advanced, share sound, and video. Let's see. Does that work? Nope, that's not going to work. Hang on. Portion of screen share. All right. Can you see it here?
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. So now let me start it and hopefully you can hear it as well.
The stuffed animal Hall of Fame! My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No! No, you can't take my rocket to the dump! Riley and I are going to the moon! Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time. We had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness.
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
How did you do that?
I don't know. He was sad, so I listened to what...
Hey! There's the train!
So we just have a few more little slides and then we'll let people just, yeah, if you want to just go back to your slides there.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. Well, I don't know, Eva, but I felt joy when they got on that train, and I felt sad when they were by the pit, the dump.
Yep. Well, I was thinking, oh, it's the chasm of futility, not the wall of futility, but it's the same thing. There's nothing he could do. Nothing he could do.
Yeah. The chasm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we all saw joy was trying to fix it and sadness just came right alongside. And then you saw I mean, I just loved it. You could see the tears flowing. And then all of a sudden, you know, and clinging to the person, and all of a sudden the shift happened and he could see the world in a different way. It was, I mean, movie writers often understand human nature the best of anybody. So many of them are so intuitive in their understanding of how these things should happen. I know that when they were actually making that movie, they didn't realize that it was going to be sadness was going to be the emotion the emotion that answers. They didn't know that when they first started writing the script for that movie.
No, but it's a wonderful representation. We'd be happy to hear from any of you about about your reaction to that too, if that worked for you. It's what we call in the Neufeld paradigm, what sadness did is what we call coming alongside. Coming alongside. And you can see it's written there. Sadness just sits with him, comes alongside without trying to fix things. And then at the end, she starts to say, when Joy says, how did you do that? She said, I don't know. He was sad. And I just listened. And then she was about to say something else, but it stopped with, I just listened.
So I think this is just it. I think when they start to cry, and I love this picture here. Again, I mentioned the last time we looked at this picture, the little guy in the red shirt, the little child in the red shirt is crying the tears of adaptation and sadness. The little one in the pink is still a little bit in the frustration. I want things to change. And so we just basically hold them. We help them to move from that mad to that sad. We make them feel warm. Lena, do you want to explain what that means about newscaster?
Well, here's where the tone of voice and the spot from which we are speaking internally becomes important. And I call it newscasting. We're just describing what's happening, just as sadness did. You must have had a good time with Riley. You lost your toy. That was hard for you. You really wanted that. We're just saying it, but without a lot of emotion. We're trying to strike a neutral place that their emotion can then find a home. It kind of just moves into the vessel that we're creating for holding it. And we just do it in a neutral way.
Yeah. And I think, again, the inside out people, it's so beautiful because Joy said, don't make him feel worse. And sadness just came coming alongside, because you can't make someone feel worse than they're already feeling. That's what they're feeling. And so instead of saying, stop it, cut it out, or trying to distract them, we're just saying, I honor and respect who and what you are in this moment. And I trust in the process. I trust that if I can help you embrace this sadness, that you will move forward. And my job is to hold you so that it feels safe enough to do it. And again, I admire this young woman here because she's dealing with two children in two different emotional places. But the beauty of it is that she's coming alongside the little guy in the red, and the little one in the pink is going to feel that coming along. It's okay. It wasn't working for you. You wanted your mommy to stay. You wanted your daddy to come back. And she's just letting him know it's okay to be who you are in this moment. And the other one will hear that, and soon she'll fall into her tears of deep sadness.
And her arm, she's so well enveloped in that, by that arm, the caregiver's arm. She's certainly being held in whatever she's experiencing. I'm assuming it's a she. Yeah.
Yeah. And when we trust in that process, then we aren't going to run into the next one, which is if they aren't given that permission to cry, that's when the explosions will happen. And we'll talk about that after the break.
Yeah. And it is important to note that children are not always immature. Their brains aren't always in a state of such extreme limitation of experience, which is the most wonderful time of life in many ways, because you'll recall us frequently saying one thought at a time, one emotion at a time. We love that about young children. That's their appeal. It will go away. They will be able to manage their emotions. It generally happens, Dr. Neufeld said, if everything is going well between the ages of 5 and 7. And there's a different process that goes on that isn't the scope of this presentation, but you can learn more about it if you're interested. But the change does happen, and adaptation becomes easier and quicker.
Yeah. Great. So we'll have Cheryl come up now. And
I'm
Yeah.
going to stop sharing.
Yeah,
Right.
and have
Then we'll have
Cheryl,
Cheryl.
please join
Yeah.
us.
Can you see me? Okay,
Yes, beautiful.
what's going on?
Uh,
What are my thoughts?
yes, sorry, put you on the spot here.
I really, really enjoyed that video because it made me feel the sadness, and I see what Joy was trying to do, and sometimes being so joyful is not helping.
Mhm.
And recognizing the sadness is part of the healing, but also helps the Riley get beyond the challenge.
Yeah.
And something one of you told me many sessions ago, but you said, everything that I do with my child influences who they become.
Mhm.
And when I see this, it just brought me back to, those profound traumatic experiences that some of us have lived in childhood ourselves, like residential school or day school, and how our reactions are impacted by that, how we react to frustration and attack since we were hurt, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Mm.
And I think that, behavior comes from our experiences, and it's not the fundamentals of who we are. And our reactions are sometimes based on those experiences that we've had. And we need time to regulate our frontal cortex and to calm our own little alarm system. When you spoke about, the hand flipping your lid. And when you flip your lid, like, this is the lid with all the logics and the thinking and the reason. But when something is happening and you go into crisis, you flip it, and then your alarm system goes off, and there goes the reason. And I think that when we grew up with traumatic experiences, this happens, when there's times of stress. And that's when we need to breathe. And it becomes important that, you count on other staff to take a break, or you do something so things calm down and you're able to think again.
Yeah.
If that's the understanding that I got from what you said, Eva.
Yeah. Well, you always have a way of putting it into words that just feels so in the moment for people that are working with young children, Cheryl. Yeah. And we have to forgive ourselves. We have to understand where we are in this whole dynamic as well. And then give ourselves the permission to try again the next day, because our children are counting on it. And we have so much leeway with them. When we come back the next day with all our good intentions, that's all they want to know. Are you coming back to see me again? They don't even necessarily always remember what you did the day before. So you're absolutely right. Count on staff to help you to get to that place where you can give all that you want to give. People work in childcare because they love children. I don't think you can last very long in childcare if you didn't actually love children, but they do challenge us, right?
Yes, they do. And the importance of giving yourself permission to feel those emotions as a person, as an individual, is something that Lena had mentioned. And it's so important that we recognize that it's okay to be sad and to feel, upset and have tears. And when we look at children, this is the growth of the limbic system, within the child. And nature is what's going to, lead that course of growth. And we must be in tune, to their impulse, and help them with impulse control. Know your children and know what they need based on your observations. And like you said before, the goal is to see frustration differently. Anger is about disappointment. Rage is about accumulation of unresolved anger. And you talked about the wall of futility, like when you encounter things that cannot be changed, at some point, they have to recognize that, they see it in us when we tell them the word no, or they hit the wall of futility.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, tell them the word no, because like I said before, I was taught, not to say no or don't, but try to explain to them in a different manner that it's not okay to be doing that and you can do this instead. But at some point you have to be, you have to draw the line. And children sense that in your voice, in your composure, like you said, the look on your face, your body language. And this is sometimes what helps them to be led down that path to adaptation. So yes, educators need to give the child the words, need to honor their emotions, and we need to embrace the disappointment in life sometimes.
I know that when I've worked with groups of people, eventually, when the message really sinks in, especially with children who don't cry a lot, they start to rejoice and they say, Eva, is there something wrong with me? I'm happy because he's crying. Well, we know that now it means that the child is safe with us, that they can let their tears out, that they can move forward. To remember that river, we have to keep remembering that river, because when it can't move forward, it's going to do odd things. The movement is what makes the growth, and so we have to give place for it. I do think for many, many of us, just saying it's okay for your child to cry is the biggest gift we can give people. Because I know many, many parents, as soon as they, like with me, as soon as they knew that it was okay, it was like, oh, I can do that. I remember one dad saying to me, I said, and sometimes kids, like, they need to cry with their dad. He says, well, my daughter doesn't cry very much. I said, well, maybe you give her permission to cry. And he said, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. I can be there for her. Yep. Just be the big, strong shoulder that she can lean against and have her tears.
Yeah.
And I sometimes have people come back to me and say, I did it, Eva, I did it. And it has changed the life in our home.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Lena.
I just wanted to respond. Thank you so much for all that you've said. It occurs to me that one of the phrases from Dr. Neufeld that I mentioned earlier is the invitation to exist, that we extend an invitation to exist to the child. And your words, Cheryl, reminded me, we have to extend that invitation to exist to ourselves, right? Be hospitable to our emotional life and find our tears if we need to, and so on. But it's a two-way street. Hospitality begins with treating ourselves with compassion. And the other thing you said that reminded me of something is when we ask what is missing in a child. So if we're starting to look for tears now, right? Eva is like, if we notice now that that's what's missing in a child, it brings an invitation in a way, just like with that father, it brings an invitation.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to share was, I have my feather here. And you see the feather is all, there's all kind of edges there. And this is like a symbol of our challenges in life. It's not perfect, but when you work with it and you keep working with it, then those edges, it becomes smoother. And pretty soon you've got a feather hole again. And this is where, I'd like to leave it, that there's always work to be done on ourselves with children. And we just need to take that time to recognize it and embrace it. And like you said, like we need to teach the children what are the guiding lights. And I'll go back to what I said and what you, quoting one of you ladies, but everything that we do with our children influences who they become. Yeah. Watch.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we will take a 15-minute break. and then we'll look at the second half, which is what to do when the attack comes. All right, so we'll see you all in. Great, well, welcome everyone. I just wanted to read a comment from Alina, who says, to summarize how I felt before taking a pause, we just took a break for those of you that are listening to the recording, and she said, it's a two-way stream. Everything we want to help foster in children must be cultivated within. It takes acceptance, commitment, devotions, and patience. You've said it beautifully. Thank you so much for that comment.
Indeed. Shall we continue then, Eva?
Yep,
Okay.
let's do that. And again, encourage people, if you have comments or thoughts, just put them into the chat and then we will look at them towards the end of our session.
Yes, we love hearing from you. So here we are continuing with our conversation about managing frustration and our role in that in the classroom. I think at this point, it's been said in various ways that acceptance of aggression is an important piece for the emotional health of the child, so that they don't feel that they are a bad person, or that which is unintentional on our part, of course. But there's such a sensitivity in children to acceptance. And so to be able to welcome eruptions, and when possible, to lead a child to tears, is a route that will bring you some reduction of frustration in the classroom and some possibility of growth and transformation in a child. And again, just to repeat, eruptions happen when there is no change possible and the child has not felt sadness. And little ones seldom go to sad immediately. They do impulsively attack when things don't work.
Yeah. And we're using the word attack in a very broad sense, because this little one here is not attacking anybody, like not hurting anyone, but it's just like this stuff is coming out that can feel like a verbal attack, right? Because your ears, there's a screech going on, so it feels like an attack. And what we're saying is that, and we're not proposing that that we accept when a child hurts another child. We'll talk about how we can work around that, but that we truly understand this little one here, the frustration has just been too much and it's just got to come out. And we need to see that as a natural, healthy, normal thing, especially for a child of this age. That this will happen, and it's happening for a reason. And as we go through, we'll unpack a little bit about what that is. And I know this is not easy to do. This for me is probably a huge challenge in my life. Most of us have been told all of our lives, cut it out. I had a sister who tantrumed a lot, and actually I think part of me prided myself on being someone who didn't tantrum, because I was the good girl and she was the one in trouble all the time. What we don't realize is that we have that potential within all of us as well. It needs to come out. And if we can let it come out in the early days, it will have less need to come out later on as children grow up.
In our last session, we talked about a story of how to soften this poor traveler who was wearing a heavy cloak. The north wind and the sun were having a competition who could get him to take his cloak off. And no matter how hard the north wind blew, he would not take off his cloak. However, with warmth, the sun shone down and off came the cloak. And this story is illustrative of how aggression, attacking energy, aggressive energy, does not always evoke sympathy or warmth in us. right? And I know for myself, it can feel a bit like the north wind. That's the cut it out or stop it, or, it's not what we would call embracing. It would be more like coming at it from a more critical point of view. Whereas if the sun is shining, the cloak will come off, the aggression will come down. If we're sympathetic to the situation, and important to note, we are not agreeing with what they're doing. We're sympathetic to how they might be feeling. And we're trying to move them from this place of mad to a place of sad. And to do this, they need our warmth. They need our warmth. We need to be that sun shining down while still setting a boundary so that there is a feeling of we're managing this so that the other children don't become alarmed, and neither does the child who's having the moment, the aggressive moment. They need to feel safe too.
And that I think was the shift that happened in that school, where people were basically able to see. We saw, if the child came into the school and was ranting about, oh, this is stupid or that's stupid, it was basically it allowed the staff to see it differently. And it wasn't that they were necessarily okay with the words, because some of the children use some choice words, but when they started to think something wasn't working for him today, and of course many of them knew the family situation, so they realized, oh, probably this or that happened at home last night. And just seeing that shift in how they saw it, they didn't see it as the start of a bad day. They saw it as, oh, something's happening here. And it was, and again, these were slightly older children, so obviously they had a bit more capacity to manage their emotions a bit, but immediately, as soon as they felt accepted, they were able to say what was going on with them or what they needed. They had an emotions room where the child, if they really needed to let it out, could let it out. But it started with the adults responding differently, not cut it out, that's enough, you're not allowed to do that, but actually thinking in their head, something's not working. Well, just that thought was enough to communicate non-verbally, I see you. I see something's going on inside of you. I honor what it is, and I'm going to work with you on it.
And it brings the aggression right down often, not always, but often. And our work is to continuously try to find a way of looking at it that evokes sympathy from us towards the child. Sorry. So saying stop it or cut it out will increase their mad. And I know from personal experience that is certainly true. There's something about having our feelings accepted, no matter how odious or inappropriate or difficult they may be, is really, really feels like you can relax.
Yeah.
And this is just as true for adults as it is for children. So it is our natural response to be protective of the other children and be protective if someone is getting hurt. We need to do that. And it is also a natural human response to have discomfort with conflict, emotional intensity, whining and complaining. So all of this is what we are up against as adults in ourselves, and how to kind of rise above that and continually stay sympathetic to their emotional state. And you'll notice in here, we say, and it can't be stressed enough, we have to keep the children from hurting others.
Yeah.
And if we can remember, if we can continuously remember, like the face of this little baby, that's really what we're seeing, a baby, no matter how old the person is. When this is happening, we're seeing somebody who's in that stage of development. yeah, they just are not in control of their impulses at that moment. And we need to find our sympathy for this very little creature that,
life is too much for them. There's too
life
much
is
going on.
Mhm.
And again, we don't have to, people say, well, do I need to know why life is too much? No. For that child in this moment, life is too much. It's just too much. Look at this, look at the sadness in this child's eye, the distress in this child's face, right? And this one is a little easier to come alongside because there is a little sadness and softness there. When there is that, you know, that real harsh, aggressive, and again, this is where we need, you know, we talk about the children not having, you know, and again, Cheryl talked about the lid. Well, we as adults do have we do have an emotional system as well. When a child starts whining, there's something about that tone of whining that really gets to us. When they really have that gets to us. That's our emotional system that's reacting. And part of what we're, you know, trying to help you here with is, if you understand why that is happening, you can use your thinking brain to remind you to not just see the hardness, but to see the pain, right? So now your thinking brain is going to shift your emotional system over to seeing the pain. And the minute your heart feels the child's pain, like this child, which is easier to see, your heart goes out to them. And now it's easier to do what you have to do. You know, so we need our thinking brain, because that will help inform us and bring us to the place that we need to be with these children.
Yes. And even though sometimes children go from immediately from things can't change to this aggression, this attacking energy, young children also find tears fairly easily, often, not always. It depends on the circumstances, but they often burst into tears.
Yeah.
I can remember a time, even in the classroom, I think I've told you this, where I thought this little boy was upset because his mother had just left. And so I was responding to his sadness, and another child who was sitting next to him got up and she streamed over to the door and started banging on it. And she said, "My mother left," you know, or something, the equivalent of that. And I was, and the child that I was addressing, that I thought was having the emotion, it wasn't what he was about. But when we speak to one thing, we will get a reaction from many children often. They're all paying attention. They're all paying attention. So then I was able to work with the little girl who was upset about her mother leaving.
But some people would be tempted to be like Joy was in the Inside Out, which was to say, well, you shouldn't talk about it. You shouldn't mention it, because look what you did, Lena. You just stirred it up. But actually, it was already in that little girl. She just was shutting it down.
She was shutting it down. And as soon as there was an opening, I gave an opening, you know, not addressing her, there was an opening for sadness, and she took it.
Yeah.
And she expressed herself.
And your day would have been so much more difficult if she had held it all inside, because now she wouldn't have liked the food you gave her, and she wouldn't like the toy that you gave her, and she wouldn't have liked this, and you'd have had this really unpleasant day with her because she wasn't able to identify what was really bothering her, which you gave her permission to do by talking to the little one next door. So it seems like you made your life more difficult by giving her permission to have that feeling in the short run, but in the long run, it actually was probably a better day for her, because you could help her deal with what she was really feeling.
Definitely. And so then we were able to treat her more tenderly throughout the day anyway, because she had revealed to us the depth of her, the depth of her pain over separation from her parents. Yeah.
So
no,
she could have been very bossy all day. She could have been really bossy all day, which would have driven you guys completely crazy. But now it was a different day for her because you had given permission. Yeah.
Well, because she didn't eat well, and we did notice that day she ate better and things like that. That's all part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit of pain for long-term gain
Yeah.
makes all the difference. Yeah.
And we did mention this already about, but it bears a little bit of a deeper dive. The frustration builds and erupts over unrelated situations. Often we don't know what's happening at home, or maybe we do know what's happening at home. However, whatever is happening outside of the classroom, it comes into the classroom, and then things may not be working. Birth of a sibling is huge. Certain sensitivities, it can be hunger, it can be home life, it can be school life. We don't know always what's going on, but we do see the result of that. Just like that example I just gave.
Yeah.
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 So we can't say often enough that we don't need to know where this eruption is coming from. There doesn't have to be an apparent reason. We can't judge, oh, it was just this minor thing and there was this big blow up and so on. It just to realize that it isn't even about that little thing. It's about something else. And we get these huge emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, some of you live in small enough communities that you probably do know what the child is bringing with them, all the things that aren't working in their home life to the center. Sometimes you don't know, and sometimes there are families that can hide it. They look very functional on the outside, and so it looks really good, and then everyone says, well, why is that child doing that? Or the other part is that the family might be functioning very well, but this is a highly sensitive child, like our children on the autism spectrum, where it's so hard for us to imagine what it's like to be in the body of a child like that you can be a very, very capable parent and still not quite be able to anticipate all the things, like the little tag that we don't notice and that we thought we got rid of, and yet the child feels it, and that builds up, the tag fills up, and then the smells, and then the sounds, and then and it all builds up. And all we did was ask the child to pick the book up, and there's a huge explosion, but it isn't about the book. And so my basic understanding that I've come to, and I realize I'm not always in the middle of everything all the time, so it's easier for me to be rational, right, to use my thinking brain. But my basic bottom line is that when someone says to me, he out of the blue, he just exploded, I would be able to say, oh my goodness, so much hasn't worked for that child. And I don't need to know what it is. I just need to know that it's just been building up, and it's, just like this dam here that has burst. The dam has burst. And so, but sometimes people want to find a reason and we can't, because we just can't go into, that. But we need to remember, and I was trained in a psychology that said frustration doesn't build up. Boy, were we ever wrong. And I mean, I know that for myself. My goodness, we all know that, that it does build up. It does absolutely build up. So some of our children we know are coming every day with a huge buildup. And we'll talk a little bit about things that we can do. And if you have questions at the end, we'll also talk a little bit more about some of the other things. Yeah.
I like the idea of reinterpreting attacks or aggression, those moments where anger, where something isn't working and it's coming out in a violent, perhaps towards themselves, but also towards others way. I like the idea of reinterpreting that as immaturity, and remembering always that we are really dealing with immaturity between these ages of birth and about 7 in most cases. And so the brain just isn't equipped to handle, it gets built up, the frustration gets built up, it needs to come out, and they're going to get it out. They're going to get it out. So if we can start thinking about this as the immature child, and then treat the incident as an accident. If there was an accident, you have no judgment about that. It's, oh, that was an accident. And in a way, that's exactly the attitude to take towards these eruptions. The child internally knows that this isn't how they want to be. They know that. but they can't help it. And so it becomes an accident. And then we can be more neutral about the situation, that it wasn't on purpose. Despite how it may appear, really we're talking in most cases about something that isn't on purpose. It was just the only way out that the child could see. If it meant biting, if it meant grabbing a toy, if it meant pushing, that was the only thing they knew to do in that moment. That was the only thought that came into their head. They didn't have another thought. Oh, I could go to the teacher, or, oh, I could use my words, or all of that. It just came out. And despite their good intentions, because they do know what much better than they're able to act. This is a gap.
Yeah.
And letting that emotional intensity come down. Eva, did you have something to say?
No, that's fine.
Okay. And to narrate what's happening. I love these words. This was my script in the classroom. You have lots of hits, bites, pushes, screams, whatever in you today. You have lots of bites in you today. How was that going to make a child feel? Oh, accepted. Right. This is just a statement of fact. This isn't a judgment. Then the next one, your frustration needs to come out. Or you have a lot of frustration today. You have many bites in you today. Those bites need to come out. This is not the way. Let me help you find a way. And this is how we move it from acceptance and also a limit. This is not the way for them to come out. Let me help you find a way. And then you do. It's generally, I have to say, if a child is biting someone because they're frustrated with something, and we give them something else to bite, or we give them something else to throw if they're pushing, or something else to push, sometimes that's not as satisfying to the child because it's out of the moment and so on, but that's okay. We've at least shown them that there's another outlet possible for them. We'll talk more about finding outlets in the day, in the classroom, through play, but just to show them that there is another way, and to mean it and to help them with that. And this way you're moving them out of mad, maybe to sad, maybe not, but out of mad to a different relationship with.
I mean, again, it's the same thing, I think, that, you know, if we try and relate it to ourselves. If I come home and I'm really upset, and I say to my husband, oh, it's just been a horrible day today. And he says to me, Eva, calm down. That does not help. If he says to me when I come in, oh, it was a horrible day today, he says, oh, that really didn't work for you. You just feel like yelling. I can tell, you know, all of a sudden it kind of takes, it takes that, I don't want to say it takes the wind out of my sails, because he's not doing it to try and change me. He's really coming alongside, and now I don't have to keep getting it out. Now I can let go. And I think that was your experience, wasn't it, Lena, with many times when you said to a child, oh, you've got hits in you today, so many hits in you. Just that often was enough to kind of,
Yes, exactly, because honestly, we are creatures of community. And so just being in relationship to somebody else with how we're feeling, to know we've been seen, to know we've been heard, is a huge, huge relief. And this is what we're doing. We're saying, I get it. And we're saying it very specifically. You know, you have lots of frustration. You have hits in you.
you have screams in you. Oh,
Yeah.
you feel like yelling today.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got so many, and you say it with that same intensity. You're not like oh, you've got lots of hits in you today. Like that feels like a judgment. No, you've got hits in you today. Now, I remember talking to one poor mother, a sweet, sweet lady. I don't think she's ever raised her voice in her life. And she said, my son, when he comes home from school, is so frustrated. And she said, and I tell him, honey, you've got lots of frustration today. And I said to her, I don't think that's going to cut it. I I really don't think, because she says my son gets angrier with. I said, yes, you're going to have to be like a Hungarian like me. And she said, she kind of looks at me and I said, yes, you're going to, oh, you've got hits in you today. And I said, you're going to have to practice. I can tell it's not natural to you. But then he'll know you get it, how it feels like to him. And then you can gently move him to his tears. So yeah, that coming alongside is, we're not going to make it worse. We're actually going to make it better. And we can't be afraid of that.
And if you remember Sadness, when she came alongside Bing Bong, I think his name was, she adopted a sad tone. So we're saying, even though we like the neutral sportscaster in some places, this is not the place for that. We kind of need to mirror for the child what they're feeling without going over the top or being out of control, of course, but to feel that frustration a little bit in our voice, just like Sadness got to the sadness with him. It's the same idea, only it's a little bit perhaps uncomfortable for an adult, like the one you were speaking of, Eva, the woman, the mother. Yeah, but it's just adding that tiny bit of what the emotion actually is. It seems to release something.
Yeah, because she had been working really hard at helping her son. Her heart was absolutely in the right place, but she just missed that little nuance. Yeah.
Okay. Oh
yeah. So now you're in the middle of a meltdown, and Cheryl was saying when we ran this material by her, she says, "Yeah, well, we have some kids, you know, they're throwing the laundry baskets and whatever." Now, first of all, remember that when this happens, this child is bringing. It's rarely what you said or what you did. That's it. You've just either given permission, it's been too much for them. They're like that stream that is just hitting the wall. It's overwhelming for them. And again, I always say, I prefer a child like this than a child who can hold it all in, because boy, there's no outlet for them. At least for a child like this, we know there's trouble. So, okay, so they've started throwing, kicking, whatever. Now, the first thing, of course, is we do need to keep the other children safe. And I think most of you do this quite naturally. You just bring the other children out. But again, it's partly how you do it. You know, it's partly how you say it. Oh, he's having a hard time today. So much needs to come out. He needs to get it out. We're gonna go. You're gonna go over here, so you'll be safe, and we're gonna let him get it out. Right. So, and then of course we look around and see if we can. And again, most of you are pretty good at this. Make sure there's not something too dangerous around. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can't. These kids are quick as lightning, and they often find the thing that is going to cause, match their emotion. And then we need to be careful about our nonverbal language, because remember, this child's brain is feeling over the top, threatened, worried, upset, alarmed, frustrated. And if we are not careful about our body language, it might keep telling that emotional brain, okay, this little part of it here, more danger, more danger, more danger. So we actually, we have to consciously think, I'm going to become as unthreatening as possible. And the nonverbal way of looking unthreatening is a breath, shoulders down, a calm face. Then this little amygdala here that's reading everything that's going on in the environment sees this adult not as another menace, but as somebody who's there. It's that nonverbal communication that's so important. And not to use too many words, because words are confusing to the brain. When the brain is in this flip mode, when the amygdala is just spewing out all over the place, even they've seen the language part of the brain shuts down, so they can't hear our words. I've actually said to people, because we all want to say something, I say, just keep a little, oh, not working for you. Because sometimes when you say to a child, oh, it's not working for you today, they get even more upset. Right. So you just have to say, not working today. And again, calm, gentle kind of way. And if you can use the word, your frustration needs to come out. So much is not going. If you can, but if you can't, think it in your head, say it, keep it inside, and try and then give them something if you can, like just push all the stuffies close to him so he can throw stuffies instead of blocks. Just be there with. Don't get drawn into it by reacting to it, but don't ignore it either. Sometimes people say, well, you've got to ignore a tantrum. Oh my goodness. Do you know what hurts a child's heart the most? Is being ignored. So you just are with, and I've seen people do this, and they are just there. They just stand, they don't say anything, they just are there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden the child feels that presence, that nonverbal communicates, and then bit by bit it comes down.
Yeah.
And then, as I say, it's so powerful, but that requires our thinking brain to manage our emotional brain, right? But and trust in the process, that once they let it out, other good things will start to happen.
We referred to that presence, Eva, as a soft mountain. We need to just be there as somebody who can absorb this. We can absorb this. We're going to be able to take this. This is not going to ruin our relationship with this child.
Yeah.
We're not going to do separation. Yeah. And so following questions came to mind.
Yes. Well, someone says, okay, after the child's had a huge meltdown, shouldn't we be giving them a consequence? Letting them know this behavior is unacceptable. Well, first of all, we've already told you it isn't unacceptable. Perhaps if they've hurt something or whatever, but the actual emotion expression, is there. And sometimes you can say to a child, take something away or give a consequence, and actually can, even with little ones, can shut them down for a moment. But it doesn't deal with the emotions that are going on underneath. And it doesn't cause them to grow up and become better at managing their emotions. And it doesn't take the emotions away. And remember, the lid, which is meant to be there to help manage our emotions, actually isn't even there for the child. So all a consequence feels like to these children is, you don't really like me. You don't even get what's going on. Because we can't teach the lid. The lid grows. It will grow when they're 5 to 7. Bit by bit, there'll be a little bit more of a reaction. But prior to 4 years old or 5 years old, it isn't. But what we can do is manage the environment, right? So they can't get into more trouble. And for the other children, that can sometimes look like a consequence. For example, if the child tends to melt down and throw things, we might not let them play in the block area until we can figure out how to kind of help them a little bit. Why not in the block area? Because blocks are hard and can hurt other children when they're thrown. So we might, however we figure it out, we might move them towards playing where there are the softer little toys. And the other children can see, oh, he's not allowed to play with the blocks. They see it as a consequence. They're happy. You're in charge. They don't even worry about it. The child might be a little bit unhappy as well, but we're not doing it to change the child's behavior. We're doing it so they get into less trouble. Because if they throw a stuffed animal, we don't have to react as much as if they throw a hard block. I actually created a classroom for 4-year-olds in a school. These were the 4-year-olds that couldn't handle regular K4 kindergarten. And I said to the staff in the school, I said, there is nothing in this kindergarten class, in this little K4 class, that can hurt somebody when it's thrown.
Yeah.
And so they found every kind of soft foam block that they could, every soft foam toy that they could, because we knew these children were going to have meltdowns. And we said, if they throw those things, it's okay, we can deal with it. And it was amazing, that group of children, within 4 weeks, the meltdown stopped, and now we could start introducing regular toys, and they went on. But they had to prevent the fallout from the desire to throw and the need to throw.
Yes, exactly. I had no blocks in my room. We had, these were the 3 and 3.5-year-olds, sometimes 4. By the time we had gone through 3 years, we used foam blocks, we used yoga bolsters, we had big boxes, wooden boxes that they could move, and everything was too big to throw or soft. And it is a consequence. It's a natural consequence. It's to keep a child by your side, or to keep them safe for the others. And I think that children fall into that, as you said, Eva, very naturally. It's just the way it is. We're normalizing this. We're normalizing a certain kind of behavior, that when this behavior happens, we're going to make sure that everybody is kept safe, and we're going to be with this child, and we're going to keep everybody safe. And that is greatly appreciated by the young children. Yeah.
Exactly. Shouldn't I be talking about what they did wrong? I mean, don't they need to know?
This is my slide. No. And this is why. We have spent the last 5 sessions talking about development with a young child. And if you recall from our very, very early days in sessions 1 and 2, we talked about the personality characteristics of a young child and how the prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet, so they don't have impulse control and they don't have consideration for others. So what this means, and this is just a backstitch to those sessions, is that we are the managers. If we ask a child to manage themselves, they can't do it. And then they feel badly because they know. But if we just assume it and acknowledge it and normalize that they are not equipped to manage themselves, then we take on that responsibility in how we manage the room and how we manage eruptions and so on, and how we manage our own fear of not addressing it in the moment. But we are assuming responsibility for their immaturity. And that is right relationship with a child of this age. They're not really equipped to be in social situations. They're not old enough in a way. And yet life today is childcare, and they're in groups of their same age. And so we're going to see a lot of these kinds of eruptions, and a lot of places where we as the adults have to assume the responsibility for their immaturity. Again.
And we wish that they could learn a good lesson from us, but when they're not ready for that. I've seen young children just looking at an adult, and the adult is talking, and I've seen them just look like, okay, but you can tell it's not sinking in. If we talk too much, too soon, too often, they just don't get it, and it isn't helpful. When there's this thing called zone of proximal, when the child is ready to hear our words and truly their brain is ready, they'll catch on, they'll get it. If we never talk about it till they're 4 or 5 years old, when they are 4 or 5 years old and their brain is ready, they'll understand what we're talking about. We can't wear them out with too much talking.
Well, and I think Eva, you might agree that can also make them feel badly about who they are, like they've done something wrong. It's sort of that cookie cutter. We're imposing a cookie cutter on their lack of impulse control, and asking them to have impulse control at a time when they can't. So how are they left feeling less than or inadequate or any of those things? So it's very elegant in a way to start assuming responsibility for all of this behavior. It makes your job easier, actually.
I've seen people wear themselves out by trying to talk too much. It's exhausting. Yeah.
Talk too much and give the message to the child that they should be able to manage their stuff when they actually can't. So again, the change will happen. Trust the process. And we're always looking, this is an odd picture, I realize. What is the behavior trying to tell us? And so this was my walk through this. This is an example of me trying to figure something out. If we're always asking ourselves, what is the behavior trying to tell me? We're open to figuring things out. And in this case, this little boy always bit Michael before nap. So I'm giving you pictures. This picture this picture is him sleeping outside, because the first attempt to solve this problem was that the only place he would sleep is outside in our playground. It was luckily a nice warm September, October in Maine, and so he did. And we had the personnel to handle that. Not many people could do that. But I noticed that after lunch, before nap, if he was with other children, often he would bite. And so what I said was, oh, it's to the other children who would want him perhaps to sit on their mats, read a book together while we were preparing the room for nap. And I said, no, this is Michael's biting time. So I'm going to make him a little spot, and that's what this is over here. I'm going to make him a little spot where he can be. And I gave him a lot of soft things. I gave him a washcloth to bite and so on and so forth. And I normalized it. Oh yeah, it's Michael's biting time. Okay. And everybody was kind of going to their mat. And there was just one group of 2 or 3 boys that liked to read a story together, and they wanted him, but it wasn't possible because he was biting them. So we just moved him over there and gave him his little spot. And pretty soon I realized he didn't want to bite. He did bite, but it wasn't because he wanted to bite. I was giving him other things to bite. They weren't useful. He was overstimulated, and he was tired, and he needed to go to sleep. So eventually we got that the behavior was telling us, I'm in overwhelm. I am tired. I need some time to myself. And when I don't get that, I bite people. And problem was solved. He went happily to his little corner. We created it for him. Nobody thought it was a big deal. If they asked for him, I said, oh, it's Michael's biting time. He's going to go on his own mat. I'll come over and read with you in just a minute. And I'll be reading with him later, and that kind of thing. So I walked around this problem, first thinking that it was about biting, but actually realizing that it wasn't about biting at all. It was about somebody who couldn't handle himself, and he didn't know how to get out of the situation.
Exactly. No judgment. It was fine. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of this, when parents would drop their children off in the morning and they'd be saying, oh, look, here's Michael, or here's so-and-so, I would say, could you orient them to me? Because I'm not likely to bite them. And they would laugh and they'd get it. And I would say, if they're oriented to the adults in the room, we're the ones who are taking care of them, and they love their friends, and the friends will happen, but just start the morning with them being oriented to the adult who's taking care of them. Yeah. There are more stories about Michael and drop off and so on that I will tell at another time. But yeah, this seemed like a good thing to have at this moment. There's my cursor. Here we go.
Oh, shouldn't I make the child apologize? And we could go on and on about this. I think we'll try and keep this one short and sweet, but the bottom line is that if they are truly feeling sorry, they will say sorry. It will be authentic. But remember, one thought at a time. In this moment, if they're not feeling sorry, it's not going to be authentic.
And we want to grow their caring feelings, so we do it by making the apologies ourselves. And I was taught years ago to apologize to both people, but I didn't really understand. And I did that, but I didn't really understand why until I was working with this material a little bit more and realizing that inside, children are very caring, and they have a lot of empathy for one another. And when there is an infraction, the perpetrator also, eventually, not necessarily in the moment, as Eva is saying, will feel badly. They do feel badly. So I would apologize, let's say to Michael, I'm so sorry, Michael, you had a lot of frustration in you. And then I'd apologize to the person who was bitten as well, because both of them needed an apology, both of them. And this is, we're normalizing saying sorry, and then pretty soon the sorries just start to come. Yeah. Again, with age and maturation, when they are able to feel, to move between their feelings more, with more agility.
Exactly. And even little children notice when a sorry is not authentic and they don't like it. You know, so it's anyway, it's if it, and the child who gets hurt, they just want someone to acknowledge their hurt.
Yes.
And usually an adult can do a much better job of it. Yeah.
Yes. So what do we do in the classroom to reduce and minimize frustration? We keep children close who are apt to get into trouble. We make sure they're fed. We provide closeness to the adult, both in the drop-off moment, but frequently throughout the day. And as we've mentioned before, during times of bodily care, this is the perfect time to build an attached relationship. And we also protect sensitive children. Just quickly to tell you, there was one little boy who needed to play by himself. And he built elaborate, beautiful structures that were incredibly appealing to the other children. But we protected his play, and just said to children, "Oh, he wants to do this by himself. We're going to do this over here." And eventually, he was able to admit other children into his play. But it took a while, and we totally did protect his sensitive nature. The other important thing to do to reduce and minimize frustration is to depend on the rhythms of the day, because children do attach strongly to routine and rhythm. They have come in, they don't know how the world works. We're teaching them how the world works. So they depend on things being the same. They get used to that. It feels safe to them. It's how we transmit our culture and how we transmit how things work in society. So we can use this as a way to minimize frustration. Instead of saying, put your things away or something, we can say, it's lunchtime. In fact, if we sing it, it's even better. Or it's time to pick up the room. So we're in the broadcasting field now. We're just stating the obvious. It's time to come inside. It's time to go outside. This is the rhythm. We're giving form to our rhythm. We're giving words to our rhythm. And I always use songs for those transitions because they entered the brain much more softly, and they made a very, very lovely transition between one activity and another. And then we should also provide lots of play opportunities to release frustration that may be building up. Giving outlets. So here are the yoga bolsters, and here are the boxes. And here's the play. You can see there's a lot of movement. They're struggling with those great big huge things. This is a wonderful outlet for pent-up movement, pent-up feelings, and so on. And if you make these outlets routine in the day, look for ways to have them outside. We had lots of stumps, we had logs, people pushed things around, and that was really good. I was going to tell very quickly how, movement, stomping. Dr. Neufeld suggested pretending a tantrum, the adult, when a child was doing something like pushing or biting as they were a little bit older, that you could actually demonstrate how to tantrum instead as that alternative. You need to get this out, so show them how to have a tantrum. Go ahead and have a little tantrum.
Stomp your feet, right?
Right. And they love it. And then they do it. Actually, I found that this worked very well. When the class sometimes would erupt into just somebody running around in circles and others then following them, I got in the circle and began to run too, and I'd sing a song and about running, and then I would slow it down, and then I would say, all done. But again, it was coming alongside the energy in the classroom rather than saying cut it out or anything that I would have done in the past, which was way more exhausting, frankly. It was much more fun for me to, and I knew I could control it. So, I mean, this is something where you have to trust yourself and trust your intuitions, because sometimes maybe that wouldn't be the right thing to do. But sometimes just joining in can be the solution to getting them engaged. And outdoor time is so critical, of course.
And we have so much more leeway outdoors. Children can do so many more things to get that frustration out, to get those emotions out, so they don't get all built up inside. That's why outdoor is so wonderful.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then finally, how to keep the classroom safe. Well, Eva's already talked about the meltdowns. We take care of the situation, and the children experience us as handling and accepting emotions. And that just brings the level of frustration down tremendously as well. We normalize incidents. Michael's biting time. We treat incidents as accidents, that they didn't do it on purpose. And then we always bridge an incident by saying, when something's happened and there's been you've had to step in, you've had to intervene, you bridge the feeling, you bridge the relationship by saying your next point of contact. I'm looking forward to reading with you. I'm looking forward to sitting with you at lunch, whatever it might be. Some way, and we've talked about bridging before, but it's such an important skill to bring into your work, is to always think about, how can I bridge any potential awkwardness that this child might be feeling, that they did something wrong, which of course they might have had, but we don't want that to go in that way. They're just immature. And if we are able to lead them to their tears, for that beautiful process of adaptation. Anything else to say, Eva? Because we're at our last.
Said it beautifully. We'll just do our last little summary of our things to remember. So see and normalize frustration, treat incidents as accidents, read the need and take the lead. And every little thing is a big emotion for a child. Our job as adults is to help the flow of frustration to find a way out. Sadness is felt in the context of safe and warm relationship. And the big one, change will happen naturally. Trust the process. Good. Well, we'll let Cheryl wrap up and then answer any questions that people have.
And
your discussion, you're talking about aggressive activity. It doesn't invoke the affection in us. And this really, I remember in my, early childhood days, like it was very difficult. And, you also mentioned it's important to be sympathetic about how they feel and to walk alongside the emotions that are overflowing. And I think that for me, I really look to finding the gift in the child. Mm. And sometimes when the child is very challenging, or you have challenges in certain areas, then it's very hard to see that gift. And you can reach it by answering their needs and putting their words to their frustrations. You need to develop a trust, which leads to bonding and attachment. You need to be present. You need to choose the things you like to do together, because it invokes laughter and fun. Maybe start with physical play, outdoor play. Look for opportunities and not obstacles. Help them trust in themselves, which will lead to a self-esteem. praise the effort and not the results, and separate the behavior from the child.
Mhm.
And, you know, I had a question, and my question was like, you know, you as both professionals in the area of, you know, psychology, what do you think about reframing and changing, you know, your words? Because sometimes how you feel inside about somebody, you know, and you label them.
Mhm.
So what do you think about that? You know, these thoughts like calling somebody stubborn, wild, awkward, emotional.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I loved how you said it. You look for the gift. What is in stubbornness, what's the gift? Somebody who won't give up when the going gets tough. Yeah, so you're right, reframing it. There's a wonderful book called Raising a Spirited Child, and they have a whole list of all the things that we could consider negative and the way in which someone has rephrased it, you know, as having, you know, as you say, stubborn, but being able to persevere. Oh, he's perseverant. He doesn't give up, right? Drives me crazy, but at least he doesn't give up. And we think also as a child, it might be irritating, but as an adult, we want adults who, you know, have persistence. We, you know, so yes, finding ways. And I know if I'm sure I can find that list if you want, just as you say, but it's really what you said. It's finding the gift in the characteristic of the child rather than looking for the problem.
Mhm. Right.
So, you know, like this is where I find, you know, like we don't, sometimes we're afraid to go there down that street of aggression, and we don't want to go with the child there, and it makes us uncomfortable. And I think what you said, you know, to remaining sympathetic to their emotional state, you know, facing the discomforts and helping them with impulse control. And that's, you know, like we're dealing with the immaturities. And we need to treat the situation as an accident, like Lena said, because where there's, when it's an accident, there's no judgment, and the child will not feel that frustration. So that was excellently put, and I learned so much from you today. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So if you guys, I don't know, at this point, you can put on your cameras, and if you have some questions or comments, is there something that really struck you today